Welcome to HeartTalk. Today we have Sandra Clarke, founder and president of the ACT Foundation. Sandra, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you.
We're so happy that you're here. So let's just jump right in. I would say this last year has been incredible, right? It's heightened awareness around sudden cardiac arrest and lay responder CPR training, but this is nothing new for you. You've been at this for a while, since like 1985. Can you talk a little bit about the ACT Foundation?
Yes. Oh, I'd love to talk about the ACT Foundation. Thank you. And the ACT Foundation, interestingly, I was involved in starting it. The seed from it came from a Citizen CPR Foundation meeting, the Cardiac Arrest Survival Summit, back in the mid-'80s. But I'll start with, I was not on the path towards CPR or any aspect of resuscitation. I was on a totally different path. And I lost my father to sudden cardiac arrest from heart attack. And I'd never even heard of CPR. I was very young. And then I heard about CPR one day, and I thought, I remember it was so incredible that there was actually something you could do to save someone's life, a second chance. I remember, I will never forget, it was like a defining moment. And then after that, I took a CPR course, although my sister had to tell me 5 times, or encourage me 5 times over a period of, and that's how, I later understood, okay, you really have to convince the public to take CPR. It's not something you naturally do. And I finally took CPR, and that was amazing. And then I got drawn in even further and was involved in helping to start a community program for CPR training. And then I ended up going to a conference on citizen CPR, and that was in Kansas City. And there I met the president of the ACT Foundation in the US, which was closing its doors. And I remember Jim Page, who is the executive director of the ACT Foundation, and Al Menino, who is the president of the board. They said, we can help you start the ACT Foundation in Canada and do similar work. And so I had that help coming from, seated at going to the Cardiac Arrest Survival Conference, which at the time was called Emergency Cardiovascular Care Update. And then one thing led to another. And yes, I, with help, started the ACT Foundation.
Wow. And I can just feel your passion. You're like so dedicated to this cause, and as is the case, there's often like a personal story, right? Connected of like a why that got you started.
Still, everyone involved in resuscitation that I meet, which are many people that represent each link in the chain of survival, they all have a passion and they all want to help. And I don't know any other field like that. Everyone you meet wants to make a difference, and they are all passionate, and they are so helpful.
So, Sandra, can you tell me a little bit about the ACT Foundation? What does the foundation do?
So the ACT Foundation, it's a national charitable foundation. The mission is to promote health and empower Canadians to save lives. And when I started it back in the mid-'80s, the focus was on promoting public CPR training, and we would run a campaign and we'd see that there would be, like an advertising campaign, and interest in CPR training would go up, but as soon as you stopped, it would go down again, and so on. And so finally we thought, where can we have a sustainable impact? And we thought about focusing on schools. We thought, if we can get CPR training into schools, not dependent on outside agencies coming in where they have to pay for it, and then the schools can't afford it over time, we thought if we could train the teachers to train the students. And so we piloted a CPR in schools program, and we developed a model. It involves bringing in CPR agencies to train teachers, the phys ed teachers, for example, to train their students as a regular part of the curriculum. And then what we would do is we would fundraise, and we continue to do that, to donate mannequins to schools. And then the schools, if you can set the schools up with the startup resources, they will continue it. They're just so grateful to have the resources. They see it as a natural part of the curriculum. So that has been our focus over time, taking it right across the country.
Wow. What a difference you're making.
Well, it's been very interesting because we're at a point now where we have set up the CPR in schools program in about 85% of high schools across Canada. And we've trained about 7,000 teachers over time, and they train about 350,000 students every year, and over 5 million students have been trained to date now by their teachers. And that's the beauty of setting up a train the trainer model. where they can run with the program. We would never have enough CPR instructors, for example, to go into the schools every year and do this. So it's just wonderful. And we have so many lives saved by students and teachers, actually. It's amazing how many teachers run into situations where they're and teachers saving students in the classroom who suffer cardiac arrest. So the program has grown. We started with the CPR training, and then teachers started asking us, well, what about AED training? And should our schools have AEDs? And our model has also been involving the medical director of emergency medical services as a medical director for the school program in their community. So it's been a very localized approach. Our approach has been national, but with deep community reach. So when teachers were asking for the defibrillation aspect, we went to the medical directors and we asked them what they thought about that. And they said, well, you know what, we don't really have many AEDs in public places, so let's concentrate on that now and think about schools later. And then, within a few years, it was recognized that schools are public places with, after hours, many people from the community spending time in the schools. So then they would fund the AEDs in schools, and then of course we learned more and more, as we're seeing now, that there is a much higher incidence of young people suffering cardiac arrest. So that, our goal was to train teachers, to train students, so students became lifesavers in the community, but also you need an AED in school. In schools, you need the on-site response, and you need the emergency response plans. So that all tied together.
So let me ask you, why high schools? What do you think is important about training at that level in the high school when they're young? And how does that have an impact on kind of future generation and likelihood to engage in bystander CPR?
So that's a really good question. We focused on high schools, number one, because it was an avenue to reach everyone, essentially. And we thought if we could set up the program in high schools, that eventually everyone, starting as a young person, would receive the training. So it was really a vehicle for CPR training. What we found was the teenagers loved it. It became like a life skill for them, and that was really attractive to the schools. They saw it as a life skill. It fit within the curriculum because it fit within the life skills. It fits within health and phys ed. The students love it. In fact, the teachers tell us that it creates a teachable moment for heart health, because the students are so keen to get on that mannequin and learn the hands-on skill and be prepared to be a hero, But we find that the students love the program, and they're very modest when they save a life. When we're speaking to them afterwards, we so often hear students say, well, I was just doing what Miss or Sir told me I was supposed to do, wasn't I? Yes. And it becomes a life skill. When you teach people when they're young, it becomes something that is natural and normal for them to do.
CPR as a life skill.
CPR as a life skill, yes. And students love it. Yes. They love it. They love being prepared. So I interviewed a young student, 15 years old, and she said, why wouldn't I want to learn CPR? If someone needs help, why wouldn't I want to know what to do? Very brave students. They love it, and they're very brave.
Which is incredible, right? You learn this life skill, and you're prepared in your home, but also in a public place when somebody goes down.
Right.
A restaurant, the airport. And if this is a life skill that's been ingrained in you since high school, the likelihood of you engaging with maybe little fear is higher. Can you talk a little bit about bystander CPR in general? Maybe how it was in 1985 when you started the foundation, and what you're seeing now up to today.
Yeah. So back when we were starting the foundation, I'm telling you, when I was fundraising, many people had never even heard of CPR. It's like, what is this? They thought it was the railway in Canada. Seriously, the CPR. Yeah, so it was tough slugging. You had to convince people. You had to tell them about what CPR was first. Even in AED, people were afraid of it. They were thought, oh, you're going to hurt somebody, you're going to kill somebody. Yes. So I know we're still dealing with how to create awareness among the public about the difference between heart attack and sudden cardiac arrest. But back then, you had to educate the public on what CPR was. And when you see the survival rates now compared to what they were, and the enthusiasm and all of the commitment to improve them even further, it is so encouraging. It makes you want to be on that bus, and be making a difference as well. Oh, yes.
So you've done some incredible work in the field of resuscitation and CPR, and we've come a long way since 1985. Your role with the ACT Foundation as well as Citizen CPR Foundation. But there's still a lot of work to be done in our field. Can you talk about what you see for the future of resuscitation and CPR training?
What is so important is for us involved in the field of CPR to ensure that every person understands the value and the opportunity of saving a life. The value of CPR training. Still, we need to get that message out to the public and make it easy for them to learn, because now more than ever, the potential for saving a life is there. So I think our biggest challenge, certainly from my perspective, is ensuring that everyone knows. If they knew, if every citizen knew how they could make a difference in saving the life of a family member or friend, a stranger in the community, and making CPR easy to access, CPR training, then so many more lives would be saved, and I think that so many more people would take the training. So a lot of it is awareness and it's the same thing.
So can you talk a little bit about heart-safe communities?
Yes, so with the Citizen CPR Foundation, one of the key projects is the Heart Safe Community Program. And it is like a turnkey program in the sense that the focus of it is to help communities put in place the simple steps that they need and protocols to give someone the best chances of survival from sudden cardiac arrest. And that includes widespread citizen CPR training. It includes public access to AEDs, and it includes templates and protocols for EMS as well as in hospital that again focuses on what is going to save this person in the community who suffers a cardiac arrest. So it's a beautiful program because it's holistic. It's not just CPR, it's not just public access to AEDs, it doesn't just focus on EMS. And the program, the Heart Safe Community Program, is set up in such a way that people can contact the Citizen CPR Foundation, they can receive the key steps, the guidance, like a toolbox, if you will, on how to implement this at the community level, and they can receive advice. They're assigned an advisor, an expert in the field, that can help them get there, if you will. So it's a very easy program for communities to adopt to dramatically increase their survival rates from sudden cardiac arrest. It's like a vehicle to get there.
And who wouldn't want that, right?
Who doesn't want to live in a heart-safe community? And the other thing is, it's not just people like us who are involved in resuscitation. Companies want to attract employees to their communities as part of recruitment. Well, they can tell them, this is a heart-safe community. You will be safer here. And hotels can brag about that. This is something that affects everybody, the heart-safe community.
Sandra, because you have such a rich background and experience, I'd be really curious to hear what advice that you might have for young people who are in the field of resuscitation.
Well, for young people in the field of resuscitation, especially for those as they become leaders, I would urge them to never get discouraged when they hear no. If they are young leaders, they're going to be pushing barriers and they're going to get lots of no's, and to not be discouraged and realize that there are ways to get around the no's. And because you're on the side of right, because you're on the side of saving lives, you will be successful. And it may mean going a different route. It may be finding out what are the barriers for the organization or the people that are saying no. You may need to do more homework. You may need to ask advice, but there are people there willing to give you advice. You will be successful. So never get discouraged by the word no. And if you're pushing barriers, expect it and be ready for it. And then just be ready to keep on going. Another piece of advice I would have is think about a pilot. Again, when we were looking at the high school CPR program, and I'll use again Ontario as an example, we went to the ministry and we said, well, we have this great idea and it makes so much sense and this is how we could implement it. And they said, go away and create a pilot and then come back and talk to us. And I think they didn't expect to see us again. And then we took that pilot and we took it from community to community to community, and so many other communities said, well, if they can do it in that community, we can do it here. And so a pilot is a really good idea to help you in terms of replicating and expanding your initiative or your good idea. So I would urge them to think about that as young leaders. And then the other thing I'd like to say is enthusiasm. How important it is to retain your passion and enthusiasm, because that is half the battle in convincing people to engage in your program or your initiative.
Wow. You are incredible. You are a superhero. Your commitment and passion and dedication, it just emanates from you. So I'm really honored to have had this opportunity to have you on HeartTalk today. Thank you for everything that you've done and are doing, the way you're leading and truly setting the example for the next generation following. So thank you, Sandra. We so appreciate you.
Thank you.